Hi there, my name is Meg Riley. I'm an academic coach here at PSU. In this video, I'll be discussing preparing for and taking exams. Just want to touch on two resources offered by Student Academic Support Services to keep in mind throughout the school year. First is academic coaching, located on the third floor of the FMH building in Suite 360. We offer one-on-one coaching for things like time management, study skills, motivation, and more. There's also peer tutoring over at the Learning Center, or the second floor of the Miller Library. There you can find tutoring for mostly STEM classes, lower division math, chemistry, physics, stats, just to name a few. Both of these services are offered in person and over Zoom, and there's typically even availability weeknights and weekends. So let's start with a gut check. Pause and think to yourself, have you ever felt anxious before an exam? Do you feel like you give yourself enough time to study? What do you think is the right amount of time to study for an exam? So, why do we take exams to begin with? They can sometimes feel arbitrary, but there's a real place for exams in our courses. They're meant to be a point of reflection of your ability to apply your knowledge, a point to distinguish what concepts you understand and what needs more time to really connect. This is also our opportunity to develop and hone our soft skills like time management, self-discipline, problem solving, and so on. Your future plans may also require a certification or a licensure test. Compared to the professional field, university exams are a much lower stakes environment to learn what works for you. This video is going to discuss how you can prepare for exams, how to work through test anxiety, finding your best approach to taking a test, and using old class materials within your studying. So, what should we be considering as we're preparing for our exams? This typical forgetting curve is evidence that highlights the importance of review in long-term content retention. When prepping for an exam, an overall ideal goal is not to relearn all the class material the week before a test, because the information is already in your long-term memory. This slide shows the typical forgetting curve where x-axis is days and y-axis is percent of the information retained. If we don't review, we lose 40% within 3 days. The steeper the slope, the faster the loss of information. If we do review, that retention curve gets less and less steep, meaning more information is moving into long-term memory and there is a slower loss of information overall. Review doesn't need to be long. It could be, 10, 15, 20 minutes, but it needs to be as consistent as possible for ultimate benefit. Your review should be focused on the concepts that give you the most trouble. Some ways you can make regular review a habit is by spending an extra few minutes after class to fill in your notes or scribble down a main takeaway from the lecture. It could be coming up with an application question based off of class's content, or even explaining to a classmate or a friend what you learned. These are small, consistent methods that help you revisit the material and can make the idea of studying feel less overwhelming overall. Here's a template for a typical study session. This is a great starting off point if you're unsure of where to start within your own exam prep. Start by setting a goal. Spend a couple minutes to reflect on what concepts you will focus on. Proceed to study with focus for a set amount of time. 15 to 30 minutes is general, but however much time you have available is still valuable. Active study methods will help you engage with the material on a deeper level. We'll be talking about that here next. Then, take a break. If you notice you have a hard time studying when your phone is around, maybe make a goal of having screen-free breaks to really clear your mind. The last step is a quick review. Did you accomplish your study goal? Why or why not? This is an important step because it keeps you from just going through the motions. It's allowing you to reflect if the methods you're using are effective or if something needs changing. So, when determining how to study with focus, try to consider what type of learning you're engaging with and what works for you. There are two main types of learning that I'll be discussing in this video: passive learning and active learning. Passive learning is very input focused. It's a crucial step in building that familiarity with class material. It looks like going to lecture, reading notes, everything that's listed on the left-hand side. I like to think of passive learning as how much information can we store in a student's head. Active learning is more focused on the output. There's more emphasis on engaging with the material. It looks like putting content in your own words, practice tests, teaching others the content, all the examples on the right-hand side. Active learning is more about what information can we pull out of a student's head, what's sticking with them. There's benefits to both types of learning, and both are necessary, However, most students may rely too much on passive studying, then get frustrated due to the lack of information retention and lower than expected grades. Ideally, passive learning will lead to active learning. If you notice you're relying on one method more than another, it may be time to find other methods that work for you. If you want to learn more about active versus passive learning and setting up a study session, check out our Study Smarter, Not Harder presentation on YouTube. This slide is addressing something a lot of people have probably heard before, the idea that everyone's a specific type of learner, visual, auditory, what have you. The reality is, it's not that simple. Learning is way more complex than just fitting into a category. The bigger issue is that people may end up limiting themselves, thinking if I'm a visual learner, this other method won't work for me. This may lead to avoiding trying new methods that might actually be effective. So, instead of focusing on finding your one learning style, the better approach is to engage with the material in multiple ways. The more ways you interact with the content, the more likely it is to stick. It also just keeps your studying from becoming static. Keeping your study sessions interesting and fresh can help boost your focus. The takeaway here is to use multiple methods. Try as many different methods as you can before you disregard it. If you're looking to branch out, you can try a few of the methods here. I'm going to touch on a couple. Visual is going to focus on diagrams, color coding, concept maps. Tactile is going to be emphasizing movement, like rewriting notes or walking or standing while studying or reading. Auditory methods include talking through the material, maybe re-listening to lecture or supplemental materials. Maybe you'd benefit from focusing more in lecture to what is being discussed, then you solidify your class notes during a review session after class. Or maybe it's a combo, like using text-to-speech to listen along as you complete your required readings or materials, or doodling while listening to class lecture to stay focused. There are many more examples not listed here. It's a world of possibilities out there. It's all about trying and not limiting yourself. Regardless of the learning style, you should always match your studying to the format of the exam you're prepping for. Many instructors will provide a practice exam or a study guide. That's a great starting point. Oftentimes, the required textbook or homework software used in your course may also provide extra practice questions. If not, or if you're looking for even more supplemental materials, consider connecting with classmates, tutors, and the instructor. Joining or starting a study group, meeting with your embedded tutor or learning assistant, attending tutoring sessions at the Learning Center, or going to office hours are perfect opportunities to try out some of those active learning methods we just reviewed. Let's take a step back and have a moment to think. What are some of your favorite ways to study? What is the most unique way you've ever studied, and how did that work out for you? At this point, we've covered the importance of habitual review sessions and also specific study strategies to try out. Now let's bring this together into a study plan. Your exam is in 1 week. How should you prepare? The first day, you want to do a preliminary check for understanding, review your past tests and quizzes, and even retest yourself. Determine what concepts you do and don't understand and prioritize them based off of what the exam will be covering. The next several days will be about starting with the content you need the most time on and working your way up. This is where you're honing those active learning skills. You can also be trying out shorter but more abundant study sessions to really break down your study plan over the week. Stay focused on the content that isn't sticking with you. Remember, studying isn't meant to always be light and easy. You may have to learn how to get comfortable in the uncomfortable when it comes to an effective study session. On the day before your exam, the most important thing you can do for yourself is to get good rest. Do a brief wrap-up review and prioritize eating and sleeping well. We're going to move on from planning and reviewing content to prepping and centering our minds and emotions. Overall, some testing anxiety is normal. That stress response can actually help you stay more focused. If you're deadline motivated, you know what I'm talking about here. I'm going to cover a few grounding strategies that can ease some of that typical stress. However, I do want to note, if you find that your anxiety is disrupting your ability to think clearly, or it is significantly interfering with your performance, please consider utilizing additional supports available to you as a student. please reach out to a faculty member you're comfortable with if you think additional support might be helpful for you. There is a lot about exams that we can't control, but there are some things that we can control, and those might make a bigger impact than you might expect. Think about your environment, both for your studying and for the exam itself. Start with physical location. Do you know where you're taking your exam? Can you study in a similar area to where your exam will be so you're used to those surroundings? Even something like getting to the test a little early so you can sit where you're comfortable can help. If you have DRC accommodations for an alternate testing location, make sure to set those up as early as possible as well. For clothing, the focus should be on ensuring your comfort. Are you someone who runs hot or cold? Maybe dress in layers so that it's not as distracting. Does noise level bother you? Consider discussing with your instructor or an accommodations counselor if using earplugs or headphones is right for you. This is something you would prepare and get permission on ahead of the exam, not at the time the exam begins. For supplies, make sure you bring everything that's required to the exam. If applicable, you should study with the same calculator you will use on the exam so there's no learning curve. For ease of mind, prepare your supplies the night before so that it's all in one place and ready to go for you the next day. Similar to supplies, if your instructor allows refreshments, take advantage. Bring something that's not too fragrant or noisy so you don't distract your classmates. And again, make sure that your instructor allows this ahead of the exam. You can always rely on some grounding techniques to help if the overwhelm gets to be too much. Practice these before taking an exam so you can fall back on it if you need. I'll be covering that in the next slide. Another option to consider is the ultimate exposure method. Take a real practice test. Mimic your test's environment as much as possible to get a better sense of what the exam will look and feel like. As promised, I'm going to cover a few grounding techniques, starting with that box breathing. So I'm going to explain it and then we're going to do one together. Basically for box breathing, you're going to inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4 counts, and then hold for 4. Okay, ready? So we're going to try one together. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. You can do as many repetitions for this as you need. It's structured and simple, which makes it very easy to use in the moment. The 5-4-3-2-1 method is focused on our senses and can help bring us down and bring us back down from a spiral. Take a minute or two and with slow breaths, name 5 things in your area you see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 that you smell, and 1 that you taste. Meditation is also a great grounding technique, but it requires a bit more prep. To get the most benefit, it's best to make meditation a regular practice. If you want to learn more, Headspace or Insight Timer are great meditation apps that you can start off with. If you're taking more than 5 credits at PSU, you also have access to the Mind Spa at CHAC. The Mind Spa is by appointment only if you're going in person, but it has a massage chair, light therapy, biofeedback games, and other mindful resources for students. There's also a virtual Mind Spa through CHAC, which is chock full of informative videos and self-guided activities. Aside from personal grounding methods, it may also be helpful to talk to someone. Don't be afraid to rely on the support system you already have, and you can also loop in some PSU resources like CHAC, the DRC, the testing services, as well as academic coaching. A little bit of a shameless plug there. These are all great supports for working through test anxiety and preparation. We've covered planning and prepping content and centering our minds and bodies. We're now going to move on to what to keep in mind when you're actually there taking the exam. We really want to challenge the idea that there's a best way to take an exam. The actual best way to take a test is the way that works best for you. You can go through an exam the standard front to back. You could Uno reverse it, get the hard questions out of the way in the beginning, or leave them to the end. Whatever method. As long as you're giving yourself the necessary amount of time, do whatever you prefer. So some tips for getting started. First, you want to listen to your instructor. It's easy to start blocking everything out while the exam is being handed out, but pay attention to what your instructor is saying. This can include details about the structure of the test, time limitations, grading. It could be pointing out things you might miss or be giving tips to help improve your chances of success. You may also benefit from reading through or surveying the entire exam before you start. This could help identify where to prioritize your time. Questions with more points are likely going to require more time and effort. Right before you get your test, feel free to brain dump on the scratch paper or on the exam itself if allowed. It's helpful when you have a lot of facts, dates, equations, or other specific content that you are worried about forgetting. Scratch them down ASAP so you can free up that mental load and focus on the other material. These are tips that are specific to multiple choice questions. I'm going to stay very brief here, so feel free to pause the video and look through each option. But I'm going to highlight this first one, so just make sure that you're answering the question to your best ability first before you compare your answer to the options listed on the exam. I'm going to be doing the same thing for the tips for calculations and word problems. Again, you can pause to look at the other tips offered here, but it's very important, I'd say, to not be afraid to get a little dirty with your exam. If it's a word problem, you should be highlighting, you should be circling, you should be making it very clear what parts of the word problem fit with what part of the equation. Pull all of the variables. Have it all available on the paper. Don't leave anything in your head. Leave all of the calculations on the paper in front of you. And ultimately, again, remember, if you can, practice with the same calculator you are going to be using for the exam. There are a lot of tips for essay or short answer questions. I did just want to highlight the idea of making an outline. This is a quick and efficient way to organize your thoughts and organize the flow of your answer. And also it's helpful for if you're running out of time, you already know how you're going to be wrapping up your response. So you can even just bullet your remaining thoughts for that partial credit. It's common to compare yourself to others, especially in a high-pressure environment like an exam. If that feels familiar, gently redirect your attention back to your own work and abilities. Everyone moves through tests at their own pace, and that's okay. What matters most is your understanding of the material in front of you. Your classmates' grasp of the content has no bearing on your progress and potential. If time allows, do one last re-review of your exam before you submit. Double-check every question is answered to the best of your ability. If you're using a Scantron or a bubble sheet, make sure you transcribed your answer over to the correct question. If there's 30 questions in the exam and your bubble sheet shows 31, you'll want to know. If you're second-guessing your original answer to a question, but you can't think of a logical reason to change it, leave the original answer. You may just be experiencing some self-doubt. Congratulations! You prepped for and completed the exam. We're going to move on to receiving and applying exam feedback. Are you feeling some type of way about your exam afterwards? It may help to reflect on what you did well and what you might have done differently. You can't go back and change how you took this exam, but you can change your approach for the next one. If you weren't satisfied, identify what didn't work and make a plan to improve. Also, remember, an exam is just one snapshot of your understanding in one moment. It does not define or encapsulate all of your ability or comprehension. Use it as an opportunity to improve both your knowledge and your approach. While we are in higher education, this is still a low-stakes environment for you to figure out how you learn best in comparison to the professional world after graduation. Ultimately, your grade is feedback, and you can always follow up once you get your results. If something is still unclear, reach out, ask questions, review exam mistakes, and use that insight going forward. As touched on, we can be using our past exams as insight for our study routine. When you get your exam back, try to identify any themes or patterns in what you were getting either incorrect or correct. I'll show you a worksheet that you can use to help with this. Again, follow up with your instructor or other supports as needed. If you're not satisfied with your exam score, but have also not yet utilized office hours, TAs, or tutors for your class, this may be the perfect place to start. You can use the test error analysis as an organized method to review your exam. For each question you had incorrect or correct, you would identify its topic and keywords. You'd make note of how you recalled that information from either you didn't study it enough or at all, to you studied but you couldn't remember it. You'll make note of how well you were able to put that material into context or how well you were able to apply that content. You'll make note of any test-taking errors or skills, and identify any other notes that you deem important. At the end of the day, being able to effectively take an exam is a skill. The more you practice, the more you know how to prepare for the next one. It's meant to be a piece of feedback into your understanding of the content. They give you insight into how to plan your next study sessions so that you know what areas are your strengths and what areas need more review. Exams do not determine your worth as a student or whether you are a good or bad student. That is all I have for our video. If you would like to discuss this further, or if you're looking for more support with self-management, study strategies, motivation, or anything in your classes, I would encourage you to make an appointment with a coach. You can use the QR code on this screen to meet the coaching team and find a time that works for you. Once again, my name is Meg Riley. Thank you for listening.